The stars above the Lurani capital city blinked softly, like quiet watchers in the night. Tall towers stretched into the sky, glowing with soft purple lights. It was a world of elegance, order, and pride. And inside the palace at the center of it all stood Princess Keela, young, noble, and full of pride. Keela's long silver hair fell like a river down her back. Her golden eyes looked out the window as a ship landed in the courtyard below. Her tail swayed with annoyance. "Another human," she muttered. "Why must they keep sending humans to protect me?" a voice behind her answered carefully. "The Galactic Council believes humans are best for royal protection, Your Highness." Keela turned toward her advisor, a short, wise alien with green scales and gentle eyes. "I don't care what the Council thinks. They're rough, rude, loud. I don't want a Death Worlder following me around like a shadow." But it was too late. The ship had landed, and out stepped the human warrior. His name was Nate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore dull gray armor. That looked old, but strong. His helmet covered his face completely. He carried no fancy medals or bright colors, just solid gear and a heavy silence. Keela narrowed her eyes as he approached. "Is this really the best they have?" she said loud enough for him to hear. Nate said nothing. He simply bowed his head once, showing respect. "I hope you don't expect me to talk to you," she added. "You are here to protect, not speak." Again, no reply. Just a slight nod. She turned away with a sigh. "Good. Stay quiet." In the days that followed, Nate never left her side. He stood silently behind her at public events. He walked several steps behind her during ceremonies. He stood outside her chamber doors at night without rest. Not once did he speak unless spoken to. Not once did he show anger or tiredness. Some of the palace staff began whispering about him. Some admired his quiet nature. Others found it strange. Keela, however, grew more annoyed. She didn't like how calm he was. She didn't like how the guards began to respect him more than her older protectors. "Why do you never speak?" she asked him once during a short walk through the palace gardens. Nate looked at her for a moment through his helmet. "Words don't stop bullets, Your Highness," he replied simply. She rolled her eyes. "How dramatic. You humans always talk. Like you've seen the end of the world. Some of us have," he said. She frowned but didn't answer. She walked ahead, not looking back. One evening, the royal court held a celebration for peace treaties signed with nearby systems. Nobles from across the stars came dressed in shining clothes, fine jewelry, and glowing feathers. Music filled the air and laughter echoed in the halls. Keela wore a sparkling dress of violet silk. She stood at the center of the room, surrounded by attention, and behind her, as always, stood Nate, silent and still. A noble from the Zenthari system, with soft fur and long ears, leaned close to Keela and whispered, "Why do you keep that human around? He looks like a statue built from scrap metal." Keela smirked. "He is a statue, strong, simple, and unable to understand royalty." The noble laughed loudly, and others nearby joined in. "A primitive Death Worlder?" another noble said. "He's probably more used to crawling through mud than guarding a princess." More laughter followed. Keela turned and looked at Nate. She raised her voice just enough for the crowd to hear. "Tell me, human, do you enjoy standing behind someone who thinks you don't belong here?" Nate didn't move. She tilted her head. "You see?" No reply. He knows it's true. This time, Nate stepped forward. The room quieted. Slowly, he reached up and removed his helmet. His face was tired but calm. There was a long scar on one cheek, and his eyes were steady like stone. Without a word, he placed the helmet on the floor. Then, one by one, he removed each piece of his armor. The chest plate, the gauntlets, the boots. Each part was placed carefully, like it mattered, like it had a story. When he stood in just a simple black shirt and pants, he looked at Keela and said softly, "As you wish, Your Highness." Then he turned and walked away. No anger, no shouts, just silence. The crowd didn't laugh now. They stared, unsure what they had just witnessed. Keela stood frozen, her heart suddenly beating faster. She didn't understand why. It wasn't just that he had left. It was how he had left, with quiet strength that didn't need permission. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept remembering the way he had looked at her, not with hate, not with sadness. Just calm. And now he was gone. But the night wasn't over. As shadows moved across the rooftops of the palace, figures in black slid through the defenses. The rebels had come, and they were silent, swift, and deadly. Keela heard the first alarms just before dawn. Her guards rushed in, shouting orders. Explosions shook the outer walls. Someone yelled that the eastern tower had fallen. Someone else said the rebels were heading toward the princess's quarters. She backed away in fear. "Where's my protector?" she asked. No one answered. And then she remembered. He had left. The palace was no longer safe. The sound of alarms echoed through its halls, mixing with shouts and crashing. Outside, the sky was dark with smoke and flashes of red from explosions. The rebels were attacking hard and fast. Princess Keela stood, frozen in her chamber, heart pounding. She looked around at her guards. They looked scared, confused, and unprepared. None of them moved quickly enough to stop the enemies. "We have to protect the princess!" a young soldier shouted, but he looked uncertain. "Where is Nate?" Keela asked again, her voice shaking. "He left last night, Your Highness," a captain replied sadly. "We don't know where." Keela's mind raced. Nate had been her shield, her silent protector. Without him, she felt exposed and helpless, but she refused to show fear. "Then we fight," she said, trying to sound strong. "Hold the lines. Protect me. I will not be taken." Outside the chamber, the sounds of battle grew louder. The palace gates shook under heavy assault. Rebel soldiers, fast and trained, moved like shadows through the halls. Keela's guards tried to stop them, but were pushed back. In the chaos, a small group of rebels broke away from the main fight. They moved toward Keela's tower, climbing the walls and disabling security systems. No one noticed until it was almost too late. Keela felt a cold sweat. She watched as the rebels reached the door to her chamber and began forcing it open. "Hold on," she whispered. Just then, the door burst open. Armed figures poured in. Keela's eyes widened in fear. She grabbed a nearby metal rod, ready to fight, but she was no fighter. Then, from the shadows of the hallway came a low growl and a loud crash. A figure moved with speed and power, knocking several rebels aside with strong punches. It was Nate. He was back, but he looked different. His armor was gone. His body showed cuts and bruises. His shirt was torn. Yet his eyes burned with fierce determination. He didn't carry weapons now, just his bare hands and the strength he had. "Stay behind me, Your Highness," he said quietly. Keela nodded, heart pounding. She watched as Nate fought without hesitation. He was faster than anyone she had seen. Every move was precise. Rebels fell to the floor, stunned or unconscious. Nate pushed through the enemy, moving closer to Keela's side. "I thought you left because you did not want to protect me," Keela said softly as she watched him defend her. "I never stopped," Nate replied. "I left because you said I was not welcome in your world." Keela lowered her head. She felt shame for her harsh words. "I was wrong," she said. Nate gave a small smile, but it faded quickly as more rebels appeared. "We need to move," he said. He grabbed Keela's hand and they ran down secret passages. Only he seemed to know. The palace was a maze, but Nate's knowledge was clear and strong. After several twists and turns, they reached a small room filled with old weapons and strange devices. Nate picked up a glowing alien blade and handed it to Keela. "Hold this," he said. "You may need it." Keela took the weapon, feeling its light warmth. She looked at Nate, now more than just a guard to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "No, thanks needed," Nate said. "Just stay close." Outside the room, the sounds of battle continued. They waited, catching their breath. Keela finally broke the silence. "Why did you come back without armor or weapons?" Nate looked at his hands. "Because sometimes the best weapon is not armor or guns. It is courage." Keela smiled for the first time in days. "I want to understand you better." "Then listen," Nate said. "Humans are not just strong with machines. We fight with heart. We stand when others fall. And we protect those who cannot protect themselves." Keela's eyes glistened. "I scorned you. But now I see strength I never understood." Nate nodded. "Strength comes in many forms, Your Highness. Never judge by armor alone." Their moment was broken by a loud explosion nearby. The palace was falling apart. "We must keep moving," Nate said. Together, they left the hiding room and continued through the palace, fighting off rebel forces when needed. Nate's skill amazed Keela, but more than that, his calm in danger gave her hope. As they reached the palace's main hall, Keela looked around. She realized her world was changing fast. Old friends might become enemies, and new alliances were needed. Nate stopped suddenly. "We need to get to the communication room. If we send a message for help, the council might respond." Keela agreed. They hurried, dodging fire and fighting off attackers. The closer they got, the heavier the fighting became. Finally, they reached the communication room. Nate started working on the console, fingers moving quickly over strange keys. Keela watched him, feeling grateful and humbled. "Help is coming," Nate said after a moment. Outside, the palace doors exploded again. More rebels rushed in. "We have little time," Nate warned. He grabbed Keela's hand again. "We will face this together." Keela nodded, feeling a strength she never thought she had. The night was far from over, but for the first time, Keela knew she was not alone. The battle inside the palace raged on with fierce energy. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of explosions shook the walls. Princess Keela and Nate moved carefully through the ruined halls, their breaths heavy but steady. Nate's face was hard and focused. His bare hands showed cuts and bruises from fighting without armor or weapons, but he did not slow down. His eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, always alert for danger. Keela followed close behind, gripping the glowing alien blade Nate had given her. She was no longer afraid. The fear had been replaced by determination and a new respect for the human who had returned without hesitation. "We have to reach the royal vault," Nate said quietly. "It holds weapons and armor that can help us turn this fight." Keela nodded. "Lead the way." The vault was deep beneath the palace, protected by heavy doors and security systems. Nate moved quickly, bypassing locks and avoiding traps that the rebels had not yet found. When they finally reached the vault, Nate pressed his hand on a glowing panel. The heavy doors hissed open, revealing rows of advanced weapons and shining armor. It was a treasure trove of power. "Choose what you need," Nate said. Keela hesitated, but then reached for a set of lightweight armor designed for her. It was unlike the heavy, ornate armor she usually wore. This was made for speed and protection, simple but strong. She also picked up a sleek energy pistol and a small shield device. Nate took a set of similar gear and began putting it on, his movements quick and practiced despite the lack of his usual armor. "Now we are ready," Nate said with a small smile. Keela smiled back. "Thank you for saving me." Nate shook his head. "I'm not finished yet." They moved out of the vault, prepared to face the rebels again. The palace halls were chaotic. Broken glass, burning wires, and fallen statues blocked some paths, but Nate's knowledge of the layout helped them avoid danger. As they walked, Keela looked at Nate differently. The man who once wore heavy armor and stayed silent was now her equal in battle. She admired his bravery, skill, and quiet strength. "Nate," she said softly, "how did you become so strong without armor?" Nate looked at her. "Sometimes, armor is a cage. It can protect, but it can also limit. True strength comes from inside, training, will, and heart." Keela thought about that. She had always relied on her status and armor to protect her. Now, she saw that real power was different. Suddenly, a group of rebels appeared ahead, blocking their path. "Ready yourself," Nate said, raising his pistol. The fight was quick and fierce. Keela used the energy blade with surprising skill, cutting through the enemy's weapons. Nate moved with precision, disabling opponents without wasting effort. After the last rebel fell, they caught their breath. "We can't stop now," Nate said. "The council's help may be hours away." Keela nodded. "Then we must hold the palace ourselves." They continued deeper into the building, toward the throne room. Keela's mind raced. The rebellion was stronger than she had thought. But with Nate by her side, she felt hope. When they reached the grand hall, they found more rebels waiting. "This ends now," Keela said, stepping forward. The rebels charged. Nate and Keela fought back to back. Their movements were perfectly timed, covering each other's blind spots. During the battle, Keela noticed something. Nate did not fight like the others. He did not hate his enemies. He fought with purpose. To protect, not to destroy. That thought stayed with her as they pushed the rebels back. After the fight, the palace was quiet for a moment. Nate looked at Keela. "You fought well." "So did you," she replied, breathing hard. Then the palace shook again. A warning siren sounded. "The rebels have a new weapon," a guard shouted. "Something powerful." Nate's eyes narrowed. "We need to find it before it destroys everything." They moved toward the source of the warning. In the control room, they found a rebel leader activating a strange device. "Stop!" Keela shouted. The leader laughed. "The princess and her human guard. This ends tonight." Nate charged forward. The leader fired a blast, but Nate dodged and tackled him. The device sparked and hissed dangerously. Keela helped Nate disable the machine. With a final strike, the device shut down. The rebel leader was captured, and the threat was over. Keela looked at Nate, her heart full. "You saved my life again." "I told you," Nate said quietly. "Humans protect those they care about." In that moment, Keela knew she had changed. Her scorn had turned to respect, and something deeper. The palace was still not safe, but together they were stronger, and the story was far from over. After the battle in the control room, the palace was quieter, but the tension stayed. Princess Keela and Nate moved through the halls, checking on injured guards and securing important areas. The rebellion was not over yet. Keela noticed how Nate helped everyone without complaint. He lifted fallen soldiers, calmed frightened staff, and always stayed alert. She admired his kindness as much as his strength. One evening, as they rested in a small room away from the fighting, Keela sat beside Nate. Her armor was dusty and scratched, but her eyes were clear. "Nate," she said softly, "tell me about yourself." Nate looked surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," she smiled. "How did you become so strong? Why do you stay so calm even when everything is falling apart?" Nate took a deep breath. "I grew up on a harsh world. Humans live with danger every day. We learn to fight and survive. But more important, we learn to protect those we care about." Keela listened carefully. "Your silence, it's not coldness." "No," Nate said. "It's respect and focus." She nodded. "I was proud, too proud. I thought your kind were weak. I was wrong. Everyone has their own strengths, Nate said. You taught me that nobility is more than titles or armor. Keela smiled. And you taught me that strength is more than weapons. They shared a quiet moment, the weight of battle easing for a while. But peace was short-lived. The palace's warning system blared again. A new wave of rebels was approaching, larger and more organized. Keela stood quickly. We must prepare. Nate nodded. This will be harder. They went to the main hall where the remaining guards gathered. Keela raised her voice. We fight not just for ourselves, but for our people. Stand strong. The soldiers cheered, inspired by her courage. As the rebels stormed in, Keela and Nate led the defense. Nate's skill with the energy pistol and close combat saved many lives. Keela's new armor protected her, but she fought with heart and will, not just gear. During the fight, Keela saw Nate injured by a sharp blade. She rushed to help, using the small shield device to block another attack. You are not alone, she said, holding his arm. Nate smiled weakly. Never was. The battle was long and exhausting. When the rebels finally retreated, the palace was damaged but still standing. Keela and Nate sat together, breathing hard. We did it, she said. For now, Nate replied. In the days after, Keela's attitude toward Nate changed completely. She asked for his advice, listened to his ideas, and even laughed at his rare jokes. The palace whispered about the growing bond between human and princess. Some nobles disapproved, but Keela ignored their words. One day, while walking in the palace garden, Keela stopped and looked at Nate. I want to trust you, she said. Not as my guard, but as my friend. Nate looked at her, surprised but pleased. I am here, Your Highness, always. She reached out and took his hand gently. Thank you for never giving up on me. Nate squeezed her hand. You are stronger than you think. Their friendship grew, built on respect and shared hardship. But the rebellion was not over. New dangers waited in the shadows, and the future was uncertain. Keela and Nate knew one thing clearly. They would face it together. The palace was still scarred from the battle, but the air felt different now. The rebels had been pushed back, but the war was not over. Princess Keela stood on the balcony looking at the city below, her mind full of thoughts. Nate came beside her, calm and steady. He no longer wore heavy armor but simple clothes that fit him well. His presence was strong, a quiet power that Keela had come to rely on. The council will send reinforcements soon, Nate said. But until then, we must hold the palace. Keela nodded. We are ready. Days passed with quiet preparation. Soldiers trained, walls were repaired, and plans were made. Keela worked closely with Nate, learning from his experience and trusting his judgment. The palace halls were filled with new energy. The people believed in their princess again. One afternoon, an important meeting was held in the throne room. Nobles and leaders gathered to discuss the future. Keela stood before them, strong and confident. We face danger, yes, she said, but we also have hope. With courage and unity, we will protect our home. Some nobles whispered, surprised by her change. Then Keela did something unexpected. She stepped down from the throne and walked toward Nate. I offer you this, she said, holding a golden pendant shaped like a star, a symbol of trust and alliance in her culture. Wear it as a sign that we stand together, not as guard and princess, but as equals. Nate looked at the pendant, then at Keela. He took it with respect and fastened it around his neck. The room was silent. The nobles stared, unsure how to react, but Keela did not care. Strength comes from many places, she said. Today, I choose to trust a human over old fears. Nate smiled, softly, and I choose to protect that trust with my life. Together, they turned to the windows, looking at the stars. The future was uncertain, but their bond was clear. Outside, the city lights shone, a reminder that even in darkness, light could be found. And so, the young alien princess and the human, who once was scorned, stood side by side, ready to face whatever the galaxy would bring.